All right, so let's move on now to the Darwin Dingoes, and who finished in the lads from Darwin that we all know and love. Finished in 19th. Sinks predicted them at 16th. We had Bubbles, who was pushing you for highest GRC in the bottom 8, mate, on a 1.43, still doing it for his team. Scuttles,
lad.
Lad, absolute lad. Scuttles, Exo, Shifter, Tricky, and Battlebot. The Dingoes. What can you share about the Dingoes with us for us?
Like every game I played against them was just great. You know, like not in as well as in terms of actual gameplay, but just the personalities of the whole team is just a bunch of characters, and like I feed off their energy basically. So I was just having a good time with them. I was really impressed by Shifter. She's got great comms, great positioning, and she supported her team really, really well. Obviously, Tricky does tricky things, and he's tricky. But yeah, Bubbles definitely. I just feel like he just keeps getting better, and obviously his showing in Masters, you know, he's definitely, you know, up there as a contender. But yeah, in terms of their team as a whole, yeah, it was again structured chaos. They just know what they're doing, but then the other end of the stick, it's just like, how are they doing it, you know? Because you look at them from the outside and you're just like, what are they like? Why is there 4 there and there's one guy over there? And then you come out and they get results. So yeah, nothing but good things for those guys.
Yeah. Think about the game differently, and that's what makes the game so beautiful.
Yeah, it's just they were
surprised by teams and what
they do. They do things out of the ordinary, which definitely threw me off more than once. You know, and it works for them. So keep doing what they're doing.
How were they structured up in there?
Bubbles was definitely one of their lead attackers. Battlebot was up there too, I remember. Yeah, Tricky was, other than being cold, he was usually defense. And again, Shifter was a lot of the defense as well.
She was one of the defenders that favored being in the base from memory as well, like in the
markets. Every time she gets shot out, she was always one of the first people to get straight back in there, and the calls from the rest of her team, just helped her stay in there for a lot longer than what I'd like her to be in there for. But yeah, that's from memory. I can't really remember too much, because I don't think we played them too many times after Cascades. So yeah.
And so have we got, what can we say for the Darwin guys? Is there anything in terms of moving into the next tier that you could offer?
Go on, Holmes.
From memory, I think we ended up versing them a couple times, but it looked like they favored like a very heavy defense. Would that be right for us?
Yeah, they definitely favored the defense more, and they'd also have that annoying floating person that would just come back whenever their base would start getting attacked, and you'd just be surrounded by Dingoes players, and you're just like, okay, well, there's no point in attacking this base if there's 4 there, and we'd leave, and then they'd basically do the same thing, you know, like they were very adapting of their surroundings. So props to them. They'd call people home when their base was being attacked, and then send people out when people left. So yeah,
I think my general advice would be, there's obviously some arenas like the Darwin arena where it does favor a very heavy defense. We saw Darwin Nats, the average, like the amount of bases that went down in a game, like it wasn't uncommon for it to be like 2 or 3. Average scores across the board were really low. So I imagine a lot of their playstyle in, I can't remember other nationals, but at least this nationals comes a lot from how their own arena plays. But Yeah, I don't necessarily think it translated very well to Bendigo. So obviously, having the 4 defenders at your base, because that's what it usually was from memory, means it's really hard for people to get your base, right? But it also means, like, you have to think about the exchange of resources, right? So if there's 4 people defending 1 or 2 people, that's not a lot of field points you're going to be getting. Like, even though your base isn't going down, it's not a lot of field points. And so my assumption would be, because this is something I see with a lot of the lower tier teams, that, you know, this is what prevents them from jumping to that next tier, is devoting too heavily to defense for too long. There's obviously, if you can make your base count 0, that's really awesome. But if enemy teams have gone, oh, this is a really heavy defense, let's not bother, and they exchange on each other, and they each get like 3 or 4 bases, and then you're sitting there with 0 bases. Even though you've lost 0 bases, you've still lost that game. So there is a time where you need to start going aggressive. So I think I would like to see that more from the Dingoes. You know, whether that's in the form of, you know, they just transition to a 2-man attack, 3-man D, or it's a case of like something really drastic where, you know, it's a really heavy D for Raiders, and then suddenly it's a 3-man attack at a base, they get a base and they come home, and before you even have time to retaliate and get like the free base, because there's only 2 defenders, they're already home. So implementing little things like that, obviously that's team specific, so how you want to go about it is completely up to you and your team, but something along those lines. We were talking before about how the best teams are made up of they generally have the best defenses, but it's not enough to just have the best defense. You also need to have the other half of the game, which is the offense. So I think if they can get some mastery of that and find some little, you know, specific rollouts, if you want to call them that they can do to like catch up on bases and stuff, I think that could be something that sees the Dingoes bump up into that next tier of play for sure.
Yeah, especially as you mentioned that attacking for the Dingoes, I do remember running into Bubbles and Scuttles quite a lot. We'd be clashing for the third team's base, and a lot of the time what I saw was just the communication was there, but it might not have been as good as what they hoped to be, so maybe that could be something as well. I don't know. I'm probably just nitpicking, but yeah, in terms of their defensive game, it was one of the hardest bases of the Cascades that I played to try and crack. So props to them.
When I'm teaching the guys locally about game controlling, that skill of firstly being able to read the game, knowing the position of the game, you know, at critical points, usually at like, you know, a third of the way in, halfway through 2/3 of the way in, knowing where things are at, and then making the decision to go aggressive is actually, yes, it's an intellectual exercise, but also you got to have the cojones to do it sometimes as well. And so for any young captain coming through, pulling the decision to pull the pin means that, you know, whether you go out with an extra attacker or you take your full team out, you're leaving your base vulnerable. So there's an element of risk there. But of course, if you're losing, then the risk return trade-off is valid, because there's only one way you're going to get back into the game. So yeah, that skill of reading the game and then to be able to actually make the decision to go out aggressive is huge in the game. It really would take you up several spots on the ladder.
100%. Sure. That's something that I preach to the our up and coming Adelaide teams as well. Is, you know, you don't want to keep the status quo when you're losing the game. You want to change things up. So going aggressive is usually the answer to that.
Yeah, I think the Dingoes had a couple of upset games too. I can't remember, but I do remember them coming out on top against some of the higher ranked teams. So yeah, whatever they do does work for them, but consistency is key, guys.
Yeah. It's so true, isn't it? At Nats, the ability to get a third and then come back and perform at a high level again in the next game, and not turn 1/3 into 2 or 3 or 4 thirds is absolutely a skill. And it's as much about what happens outside the arena as what happens inside the arena when that's happening. But yeah, that's our review of the Darwin Dingoes, and yeah, just lads, we love those guys, and hopefully they stick together and come back. And I'm sure Bubbles is like, I'm still carrying you guys. When's the next young and up and coming like star coming from Darwin to take the mantle as the premier player from the region? But Bubbles is up there doing it again. Hopefully they can bring some new blood. Or we've got some new blood coming through on Crazy as well. And hope to see you next year, guys.
Yeah, hopefully the cold doesn't scare them away. I remember, just another side note, the first person I saw when I got to site on my first day there was Tricky, and he was just standing outside having a smoke, and he was just like, I don't like this. And I was like, hey, how you going? And he's like, I'm bloody cold.
Yeah, I get it. Queensland is like a modified version of Darwin, and even I feel like that sometimes in places like that. So they must have it on steroids, poor guys.